14 of the 15 vegetables I'm about to show you were grown by medieval farmers for over 500 years across Europe. And every single one of them outproduced what most modern backyard gardeners harvest today. I found the records. They were in monastery agricultural manuscripts, medieval estate inventories, and farming calendars that predate the seed catalog industry by half a millennium. These vegetables fed entire villages through brutal winters, produced heavy yields in soil that never saw a bag of synthetic fertilizer, and required no hybrid seed patents. Big agriculture did not want you growing these because every pound you harvest is a pound you do not buy. I am going to walk you through all 15, tell you exactly how medieval farmers grew them, and be honest about which ones still deserve a spot in your garden and which ones the internet has romanticized beyond reason. The last one on this list is the vegetable that genuinely changed how I think about productive gardening, a crop so prolific that commercial growers actively suppressed home cultivation of it for decades. And after the main 15, I have a bonus method I pulled from a 14th century French estate manual, a soil preparation technique that eliminates the need for store-bought amendments entirely. No one is selling this. Let's get into it. Here's the context you need to understand. Before the rise of commercial seed companies in the mid-1800s, every farmer saved seed. Every village had its own locally adapted varieties. Medieval monasteries were the agricultural research stations of their era, running controlled growing trials and documenting yields in meticulous Latin records. Then the seed industry consolidated. By 1900, companies like Burpee and Ferry Morse were selling convenience. By 2000, just 4 corporations controlled over 60% of the global seed market. The varieties that did not ship well, did not look uniform, or could not be patented quietly disappeared from catalogs. What I have done is go back to the original records and pull out the 15 most productive vegetables that medieval farmers relied on. Crops that modern industry had every reason to make you forget. So here's what I uncovered, starting with something most gardeners have never even considered growing. The first one surprised me because it is sitting in most grocery stores right now, yet almost nobody grows it at home. Broad beans, also called fava beans. Medieval farmers across England, France, and Germany grew broad beans as a primary calorie crop, not a side dish. The Domesday Book of 1086 records bean cultivation on more states than any other crop besides grain. Why? Because broad beans fix their own nitrogen. They pull it right out of the air through root nodules, feeding themselves and enriching the soil for whatever comes next. A single row 10 feet long can produce 8 to 12 pounds of shelled beans in one season. Plant them in early spring, 4 to 6 inches apart, 2 inches deep. They tolerate frost down to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which means in zones 6 through 9, you can direct sow them in February or March, a full 2 months before most other crops go in the ground. Medieval farmers knew this crop did double duty. It fed the family and it fed the soil. Modern agriculture replaced it with synthetic nitrogen. That was not an accident. This next one connects directly to why broad beans work so well, because medieval farmers understood something about crop sequencing that the fertilizer industry needed you to forget. Turnips. Not the sad woody things you see in supermarkets. Medieval turnips were a staple root crop, harvested young, at about 2 to 3 inches in diameter, when the flesh is sweet and tender. 13th century English manor records show turnip yields of 6 to 8 tons per acre on unfertilized ground. They grow fast, 60 days from seed to harvest, which means you can squeeze 2 or even 3 crops into a single season. Sow them directly, half an inch deep, in rows 12 inches apart, thin to 4 inches between plants. The greens are edible too, packed with calcium and iron. Medieval families ate the whole plant, roots and tops. Every part of this vegetable produces food. Nothing is wasted. And here's what the seed catalogs never tell you. Turnips actually improve the soil structure with their taproots, breaking up compacted ground and leaving channels for water and air. When was the last time a seed company told you that a vegetable could replace a broad fork? Now this one is something I found referenced in multiple monastery garden plans from the 12th and 13th centuries, and it is a crop that most American gardeners have completely overlooked. Parsnips. In medieval England, parsnips were the potato before potatoes arrived from the Americas. They were the primary starchy root vegetable for hundreds of years, and they have one trait that no modern crop breeder has been able to improve upon. They get sweeter after frost. The cold converts their starches to sugars. A parsnip pulled from frozen ground in January tastes like it has been glazed with honey. No breeding program needed, no sugar added. Just patience and cold weather doing exactly what nature designed. Plant parsnip seed in early spring, ½ inch deep. They are slow to germinate, sometimes taking 3 to 4 weeks, but once established, a single parsnip root can weigh over a pound. Leave them in the ground through winter and harvest as needed. They store themselves. No root cellar required. No processing. No electricity. Medieval farmers had fresh, sweet food available in the dead of winter, pulled straight from frozen soil. Think about that. The most convenient storage method in history is doing absolutely nothing. If you are finding value in what I'm uncovering here, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I dig through historical records, old government manuals, and buried research to bring you the gardening knowledge that mainstream advice leaves out. No products to sell, no sponsors to please, just the straight truth about what actually works. All right, let us keep going. Here is one that seemed almost too simple when I first read about it in a Benedictine monastery manual from southern Germany. Kale. Not the trendy superfood that appeared in smoothie recipes 10 years ago. Medieval kale was a workhorse crop that produced food for 9 months out of the year. Varieties like lacinato, which traces directly back to Italian gardens of the 1400s, can be harvested leaf by leaf from early summer through the following spring. One plant. 9 months of continuous food. A single kale plant can produce 6 to 8 pounds of leaves over its lifetime if you harvest correctly, taking the lower leaves and letting the crown keep growing. It survives temperatures down to 10 degrees Fahrenheit. It actually produces new growth in late winter when nothing else in the garden is alive. Medieval peasant families survived on kale soup through months when the root cellar ran low. The seed industry replaced these perennial producers with annual hybrids that die after one harvest and force you to buy seed again next year. That was by design. Now this next crop is one that connects to everything I have been telling you about medieval self-sufficiency, and it gets to the heart of what was deliberately erased. Leeks. Go look at a medieval garden plan from any European monastery or manor house. Leeks are always there. Always. The Capitular de Villis, Charlemagne's imperial decree from around the year 800, specifically mandated leek cultivation on every royal estate. They produce massive yields in minimal space, they store in the ground through winter, and they require almost no care once established. A single leek takes up about 6 inches of row space and produces a stalk weighing up to a pound. Plant them in trenches 4 to 6 inches deep, then gradually fill in the soil as they grow. This blanches the stem white and extends the edible portion. You can begin harvesting in late summer and continue pulling leeks from the ground through February in most climates. That is 6 months of harvest from a single spring planting. No succession planting needed, no refrigeration, no canning. This connects to a pattern you should be noticing by now. Medieval farmers selected vegetables that stored themselves, that lasted through winter, that did not require expensive preservation, and nothing embodies that principle more than the common onion. Archaeological evidence from Bronze Age settlements shows onion cultivation going back over 5,000 years. Medieval records from the 13th century document onion yields that would impress any modern gardener, with properly cured bulbs lasting 8 to 12 months in simple dry storage. Plant. Sets or transplants 4 to 6 inches apart in early spring. Harvest when the tops fall over naturally in midsummer. Cure them in a warm, dry, shaded area for 2 to 3 weeks until the necks are completely dry and papery. A 10-foot row produces 20 to 30 pounds of onions, stored properly in mesh bags or braided and hung in a cool room at around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. They will last until the following spring. You just grew a full year of onions from one planting. No corporation profits when your onion supply lasts 12 months. Here's where it gets interesting, because this next crop was so productive that medieval tax records actually tracked it. Cabbages. The medieval cabbage was not the bland, pale thing wrapped in plastic at the store. It was a dense, heavy-headed variety that could weigh 15 to 20 pounds, a single head. Medieval German estate records from the 1400s document cabbage yields that modern organic farmers would struggle to match. And cabbage has a preservation trick that extends its value enormously. Fermentation. Sauerkraut was not a condiment, it was a survival food. A 50-pound harvest of cabbage, fermented with nothing but salt, produces enough preserved food to last an entire family through winter. The lacto-fermentation process creates beneficial bacteria, preserves vitamin C, and requires no energy input whatsoever. Plant cabbage transplants 18 to 24 inches apart in early spring. They prefer cool weather and rich soil. Side dress with compost at 4 weeks. A fall planting works even better in zones 7 through 9. The key is to grow a storage variety like late flat Dutch, which was documented in European gardens as early as the 1500s. One crop. One ingredient for preservation, months of food. Let me ask you something. When was the last time a modern gardening guide told you to grow vegetables specifically for how long they last? That is the knowledge that was erased. And the next crop takes that principle even further. Carrots. Medieval carrots were not orange. The original cultivated varieties were purple, yellow, and white. Orange carrots did not appear until Dutch growers developed them in the 1600s. But the color is not the point. The productivity is. A single raised bed 4 feet by 8 feet can produce over 100 pounds of carrots in a season. Plant seed directly, a 1/4 inch deep, in loose soil free of rocks, thin to 2 inches apart. Harvest begins at about 70 days for baby carrots and continues for months because, like parsnips, carrots can be left in the ground and pulled through winter. Mulch them with 12 inches of straw before the ground freezes, and you have fresh carrots available in January. Medieval farmers did exactly this. They called it clamping, covering root crops in place with insulating material. No root cellar needed. No processing, just straw and patience. Speaking of crops that medieval farmers understood far better than we do today, I want to talk about peas, specifically field peas, also called dry peas. These were a caloric powerhouse in the medieval diet. The phrase peas porridge hot, peas porridge cold is not a nursery rhyme. It is a description of daily medieval meals, dried peas stored indefinitely. They provided protein when meat was scarce, and they fixed nitrogen in the soil, just like broad beans. A 10-foot double row of dry peas produces 4 to 6 pounds of dried, shelf-stable food. Plant them 2 inches deep, 2 inches apart, in early spring as soon as the ground can be worked. They tolerate frost. Let the pods dry completely on the vine before harvest. The dried peas store in glass jars for years without any special treatment. The medieval farmer had a year-round protein source that also improved the soil. The modern garden center would rather sell you a bag of fertilizer and a can of beans. Now, I uncovered this next one in a translation of a 12th century Arab agricultural treatise, and it changed how I think about leafy greens entirely. Spinach. Most gardeners treat spinach as a spring crop that bolts in heat. Medieval Arab and Mediterranean farmers knew better. They grew spinach as a fall and winter crop, sowing seed in September and harvesting through March. The key is timing. Sow spinach seed 1/2 inch deep in late August or early September, depending on your zone. As day length shortens and temperatures cool, spinach grows slowly but steadily, producing thick, sweet leaves that are nutritionally superior to the rapid growth spring crop. A 4 by 8 foot bed sown in fall can produce continuous harvests for 5 to 6 months. The leaves are sweeter and more tender than anything you will find in spring because cold stress triggers sugar production in the plant, just like parsnips. Medieval farmers in Spain and North Africa documented this timing over 800 years ago. Modern gardening advice still tells You to plant spinach in spring and fight the bolt. Why? Because a crop that fails fast gets you back to the garden center buying more seed. Think about that pattern. Every piece of mainstream advice seems to steer you toward buying more, growing less, and depending on the store. And this next vegetable breaks that cycle more dramatically than almost any other. Garlic. One clove planted in October becomes an entire bulb of 6 to 12 cloves by the following July. That is a 6 to 12-fold return on your planting stock every single year without ever buying seed again. Medieval records from Benedictine monasteries show garlic cultivation on virtually every estate across Europe. It was medicine, food preservation, and flavoring in one plant. Plant individual cloves 2 inches deep, 6 inches apart, in October or November. Mulch with 4 inches of straw. Ignore them all winter. They will emerge in early spring and be ready to harvest when the lower leaves begin to brown in. Midsummer. Cure them in a dry, shaded spot for 3 weeks. Properly cured garlic lasts 8 to 10 months. And here's the part that should frustrate you. A single bulb from the grocery store contains enough cloves to plant an entire row. $1 worth of garlic produces $20 to $30 worth of harvest. The math is that simple. The seed industry would rather you not do it. Now this next crop is one I almost left off the list, but the medieval production records convince me. Beets. Specifically the root and the green together, because medieval farmers never separated them. Beet greens contain more iron and calcium per ounce than the root itself. A single planting gives you 2 distinct vegetables. Sow beet seed directly, 1/2 inch deep, 4 inches apart. They germinate in 7 to 14 days, and the greens are harvestable within 30 days. The roots reach full size in 60 to 70 days. A 4 by 8 foot bed produces 40 to 60 pounds of roots, plus several large harvests of greens, and beets store beautifully. Packed in damp sand in a cool location, they last 4 to 5 months. Medieval root cellars were designed around exactly this kind of storage. No electricity, no freezer bags, just sand and cold. Here's one that most people do not associate with medieval farming at all, but the evidence is undeniable. Lettuce. Roman and medieval Mediterranean farmers grew lettuce varieties that would be unrecognizable in a modern supermarket. These were not the watery iceberg heads bred for cross-country shipping. They were dense, flavorful, sometimes bitter-cutting lettuces that regrew after harvest. Sow lettuce seed every 2 to 3 weeks from early spring through fall for continuous supply. The cut and come again method, where you harvest outer leaves and leave the crown, was standard medieval practice. A single bed produces lettuce for 6 months or more. Modern lettuce breeding eliminated flavor, eliminated nutrition, and eliminated regrowth ability, all to serve the supply chain, not the gardener. And this brings me to the last one, the vegetable I told you about at the beginning, the one that genuinely changed how I approach productivity in the garden, a crop so extraordinarily prolific that commercial vegetable growers in the early 20th century actively lobbied to discourage home cultivation because it undercut their markets. Beans. Not just any beans, pole beans. Specifically the old climbing varieties that medieval and early American farmers grew on tall supports. Varieties like Scarlet Runner, Kentucky Wonder, and Lazy Housewife, all of which trace their lineage back centuries. Here's why this is the most important crop on this list. A single pole bean plant, growing on an 8-foot support, produces 3 to 5 times the yield of a bush bean in the same ground space. One plant. Let that sink in. A 10-foot row of pole beans on a simple trellis made from sticks produces 20 to 30 pounds of fresh beans over a season that stretches from midsummer to first frost. When you let some of those beans dry in the vine, you have a shelf-stable protein source that lasts years without refrigeration, canning, or freezing. Medieval farmers grew pole beans up every available vertical surface on fences, walls, poles cut from the woods. They understood that vertical growing multiplied their harvest without expanding their garden footprint. Early 20th century commercial growers pushed bush beans because they could be machine harvested. The old pole varieties required handpicking, which meant they were perfect for home gardens, but useless for industrial agriculture. So the seed catalogs quietly dropped them. They promoted bush varieties that produced one concentrated harvest and then died, forcing you to buy more seed, more fertilizer, more of everything. The old pole varieties are still available if you look for them. Grow them on a simple trellis of bamboo or branches lashed together, 8 feet tall. Plant 6 seeds per pole, thin to the strongest 3. Side dress with compost once a month. Harvest every 2 to 3 days to keep the plants producing. A family of 4 can get a full season of fresh and dried beans from a 12-foot row. This one crop replaced a significant portion of purchased food for medieval families across Europe and early American homesteaders alike, and the industry made sure you never thought to grow it. Now let me walk through a few common mistakes that I see even experienced gardeners making, mistakes that are directly connected to the misinformation we've been fed for decades. The first mistake is buying new seed every single year. I did this myself for longer than I care to admit. The seed industry convinced us that last year's seed is dead seed. The truth is that most vegetable seed remains viable for 3 to 5 years when stored in a cool, dry place. Bean and pea seed lasts 3 years or more. Tomato seed can last 5 to 7 years. Stop throwing away perfectly good seed because the packet has last year's date on it. The second mistake is tilling the garden every spring. I covered this in the context of medieval practices, but it bears repeating. Every time you turn the soil over, you destroy fungal networks, expose weed seeds to light, and burn off organic matter. Medieval farmers used raised beds and mound planting. They added material to the top of the soil and let biology do the mixing. Your rototiller is undoing months of biological work in 20 minutes. The third mistake is growing only summer crops. Most modern gardening advice focuses entirely on the June through September window. Medieval farmers harvested food 10 or 11 months of the year because they selected crops that thrive in cool and cold weather. If your garden sits empty from October to April, you are leaving 6 months of potential food production on the table. Plant garlic in fall, sow spinach in September. Leave carrots and parsnips in the ground through winter. The garden does not have to sleep when you do. The fourth mistake is spacing plants based on the seed packet instead of the actual variety. Those generic recommendations were written for commercial varieties bred for uniformity. Heritage and medieval type varieties often need different spacing. Grow a few test plants each season and observe how they actually behave in your soil and climate. Your eyes will teach you more than any packet. Now here's the bonus technique I promised you, the one I pulled from a 14th century French estate manual. It is a soil preparation method called trenching, and it eliminates the need for store-bought amendments entirely. You dig a trench 12 inches deep across the width of your bed. Into that trench, you place a layer of kitchen scraps, garden waste, straw, anything organic about 4 to 6 inches deep. You cover it with the soil from the next trench, then fill that trench with more organic material and continue across the bed. By spring, the buried material has decomposed into the richest soil you have ever seen, directly in the root zone, where your plants need it most. No compost bin, no turning, no waiting months for a pile to break down. Medieval French gardeners used this method to maintain kitchen gardens that produce continuously for decades without any imported fertility. I started doing this every fall, and the difference in my spring soil is something I genuinely wish someone had shown me 30 years ago. One afternoon of digging in November replaces an entire season of buying amendments. And if this changed how you think about what belongs in your garden, drop a comment and tell me which one of these 15 you're going to try first. Share this with someone who still thinks productive gardening requires a wall of products from the garden center. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time, because I'm just getting started pulling these buried methods back into the light. Every one of these 15 vegetables was grown for centuries without a single bag of synthetic fertilizer, without patented hybrid seed, and without a corporation standing between the gardener and the harvest. That knowledge did not disappear because it stopped working. It disappeared because it stopped being profitable for someone else. Your soil is ready, your history is waiting, Now go grow something they told you that you could not.